the title itself might be kind of intriguing. How many of you have heard of Rajasimha Pallava? Some of you. He is the king who sponsored several temples in Kanchipuram and perhaps definitely the shore temple in Mahabalipuram. I presume most of you been to Mamallapuram, and Babington we'll come to in a minute. So these three things, you probably recognize the shore temple. Almost everybody probably recognize the shore temple. It's very iconic. The sculpture in the cave in the middle, the excavated cave temple in the middle, is near a place called Tiger Cave. Tiger Cave itself is about 3-4 kilometers from Mamallapuram. It's part of the Pallava monuments there, and it's one of the cave temples there called Adirana Chanda Mandapam, and there is the central sculpture is the sculpture in the shrine. It is of Shiva, Parvati and Skanda, the baby in the middle, Soma Skanda. So I'll come to, so Mamallapuram was, the most of the ancient monuments in Mamallapuram were built by the Pallavas. There may be a couple of things there before the Pallavas. Pallavas ruled in this area, Kanchipuram, from around the 4th century to about the 9th century. These monuments are from the 7th and 8th centuries. Around 16th century or so, Mamallapuram was abandoned, or it lost its importance dramatically. Only one temple got a little bit of worship, attention turned away, lot of invasions and so on, right? The East India Company, the Portuguese were here, the British came along, Aurangzeb, Golconda, all of these things were happening here. So for about a couple of 100 years, it lost attention. And in the late 18th century, the certain British travelers, mainly traders, then some scholars, started picking up interest and going there. There is a small village always there, and the people there were worshipping one or two of the temples there. But most of the Pallava monuments were in a great state of neglect. So William Chambers was a gentleman who had visited it. He wrote an account for it. It was published in 1788 in Calcutta, the Asiatic Society of Bengal. One of their first talks was about Mamallapuram. Even though it was happening in Bengal, it's a man who went from Madras to, he had visited Mamallapuram and wrote an account about it. He was writing mostly from hearsay, and there were very fantastic stories about a great king called Mahabali associated with the Vishnu Purana, Vamana Avatara and so on. A few years later, a person called Goldingham, who founded the survey school, which is now the Guindy Engineering College, he went on a trip. He took some recordings, but he didn't know what he was looking at. He didn't know what the language was. He didn't understand the sculptures and all that. And in 1803, a person called Colin Mackenzie, avid scholar of India, whose fantastic collections are there at the Government Oriental Manuscript Library. He was a very avid researcher. He could read Tamil and he could read Sanskrit, and he went with the assistant Kavali Lakshmaya. They again got a very mythological kind of a story, but they got about half of the monuments right, but most of them were buried in sand. They are not fully recovered. We will see some pictures of that period. The first real scholar to properly study and document things in Mamallapuram was Babington, who we will see is a medical doctor who was also working in Madras, and he got interested, he travelled and came back. So in 1844 he published an article on it, including pictures that he drew, transcripts of the inscriptions that he saw. There was another paper by Braddock and Mahon. There are two other people were also there. They gave a more detailed inscription of some of the later Chola inscriptions there. Then you had in 1890 Hulsh decipher fully the long Sanskrit inscription of the Pallavas, give a translation and undertake work. Hulsh was the one who discovered that a king called Rajaraja had built the Tanjavur. That's his big claim to fame. The Tanjavur temple, until then, people thought a king called Karikala Chola had built it. And he said, no, there's an inscription of a king called Rajaraja. Then Alexander Ray. So there are intermediate other people who are doing excavations, improvements and so on. So I'll just give a couple of definitions. An inscription is literally the writing on the stone or on copper plate that is In our context, it is inscriptions of Pallavas mainly, and one or two Chola inscriptions also, what the kings are commanded to be written on stone. A transcript is a written copy or a printed copy of what was there on stone. Somebody takes, an archaeologist, an epigraphist takes a right stone, the copy. A facsimile is trying to be an exact copy, letter by letter, shape by shape, a copy of that inscription. And a transliteration is when you write it in a script of a different language. Suppose most of us can't read Sanskrit or Devanagari or Grantham. So somebody writes it in English script or Tamil script or whatever. So, or modern Devanagari rather than the old one. It's a Grantham script. That's what we call a So for example, if there is a word Panpadu, it's a Tamil word for culture, and you write it Panpaa. So what you are doing is transliterating the Tamil word into English letters. That's what you are doing. So with this, it will help, as you go through this. So Goldingham, he was the assistant to Michael Topping's. He's got a very interesting figure himself. Michael Topping was the first person to calculate the longitude of Madras. There is a monument to him, and there is this longitude pillar at the Nungambakam Observatory today. The weather station, the meteorology station there used to be a astronomical observatory for a brief while. This guy, using astronomical observations, calculated the longitude of Madras as 82 degrees and latitude as 13 degrees 5 minutes north, and they set Madras time, and Goldingham was his assistant. He was an astronomer there. He established Madras time relative to GMT. We were using different time in India. We are based on Indian calendar. Every local place had its own time. We used something called the Ujjain meridian and all that. And so he became fellow of the Royal Society and all that. But for the interest sake, he took real interest in Indian astronomy, and he had a couple of Indian astronomers called Trivenkatachari and Srinivachari who worked with him. He was doing very interesting stuff. His most famous work in Madras is probably that pink building there. That's called the banqueting hall today. It was called the banqueting hall then, now it's called the Rajaji Hall, and he built that. And he even conducted certain velocity experiments. So one of the scientific experiments that were conducted in Madras. And this is what Mamallapuram looked like in his time. There's no photographs, because photograph was yet to be invented. It was an invention of the 1840s, 50s. And so you have, this is what Arjuna's penance looked like then. You can see, how undeveloped the area was. Today it's much more, now this area is a parking lot. You can't see this view at all, and so on. There are shops there. This is a picture by Thomas and William Daniel from 1789. This is what the temple looked like then. This is what the Fairathas look like, completely unkempt, not properly excavated. The lower parts buried in sand. You can see a couple of people exploring on the camels. This is a photograph from the 1890s. So even in the 1890s, it was not properly retrieved. Actually, they had one attempt, then the sand came back and covered everything, so they had to do a second attempt. And this is what it looks like today. You can see the contrast. Here the lion and the elephant are buried up to their shoulders, and here it's much deeper, you have to excavate. This is done by enterprising people in the early 1830s, and by 1860 archaeological survey had been established, and so 1890 archaeological survey cleared it up. So this is what it looks like now. Goldingham's paper was written in 1788, no sketches of sculptures. He didn't know what the language or the script was. He copied some inscriptions that he saw. There are only inscriptions on 4 or 5 monuments. He copied some of the inscriptions. He didn't even see some of the other sculptures and monuments. He saw some of them and recorded them. And he mostly had Puranic stories from the people. He knew nothing about the Pallavas. In fact, Goldingham also didn't know much about the Pallavas. Even Babington didn't know about the Pallavas. So these are some of the scripts that he copied. He didn't know what script it was, what language it was, some conjectures and so on. So 20 years later comes in Benjamin Guy Babington. He is secretary of by this time they had established something called the Madras Literary Society. He was really interested in several things. He translated Veerama Munivar, called Constantine Beshi. He called himself Veerama Munivar. He had written a Tamil grammar, and this man translated that to English. He studied geology. Son of a geologist after whom a rock is named, Babingtonite. He was secretary, after he went back, he became secretary to the Royal Asiatic Society in London, founded the Epidemiological Society there, Pathological Society, etc. He even invented a device called the laryngoscope. This all happened in his later part, after he left India. So he was here for about 10 years. Then he went back to England and established a big reputation. Just additional information, not necessarily relevant. So there was no professional archaeology at that point. It was just a amateur pastime. So, and that would be true for another 30-40 years. They were all amateur attempts, and then they formed that science, or what do you call it, this field of archaeology was developing until around 1850, 1860. 1860 they established an archaeological survey. Babington's paper has a lot of sketches, beautiful sketches. This one is the Varaha Mandapam. This is the Arjuna's penance. This is the Durga sculpture on the right is Durga sculpture from the Varaha. These are all sculptures from the Varaha Mandapam. I am just giving it to you for information. And he noticed that there are two types of inscriptions. They are both Grantham, or the script called Grantham. They are used to write Sanskrit in southern India. Is that clear? Around the 5th, 6th century onwards, or even maybe a little earlier, North India was using a script called Nagari or Devanagari to write Sanskrit, Prakrit, etc. And in South India, a different script called Grantham, this is Grantham, was used to write Sanskrit. Is that clear? And he sees two different versions. One is the two things that you see in the Dharmaraja Ratham, one of the tallest of the 5 Rathas. It's a more straight lined kind of script with some curves. The one in the Tiger Cave, Adirana Chanda Mandapam, is a much more curved script. It's got more curved script. And so he thought there were two different scripts, curved letters versus straight line letters. So he created a table of letters.
That was not Tamil.
They are both Sanskrit. There is this, yeah.
And he knew that this Grantham script, the Grantham was already.
So this script had transformed by the 19th century. Even today we use Grantham. It's only after independence we have stopped using Grantham because Devanagari has become a national kind of a thing. South India was using Grantham until 1950, 1955. You still find Sanskrit documents, palm leaves to printed stuff in Grantham, but that Grantham must change dramatically from the Pallava era script. Okay, it's still called Grantham. Malayalam is written mostly in a very, the Malayalam script is very, very similar to this, but there are variations. Okay, but Sanskrit was written using this derivation of the script. If you read this script, if you know the current Grantham, you can learn this and vice versa. You can see the similarities. It's easier to, but learning the script takes time. Okay. The Tamil script that we used, at least some scholars believe that the Tamil script that we use today comes from this Grantham, is derived from this Grantham. Okay. So he said that he created two alphabetical tables of whatever letters he could find. The curved letters from what he called Ganesha Pakoda, what we call Ganesha Ratha, and the straight line letters from Dharmaraja Ratha. So he created the two tables. They are very similar, but clearly it's like italics versus non-italic. You can see the difference, straight lines versus a little more curved kind of thing. He also copied or created a table of the Tamil scripts there. Now we don't know which one this is. There are Tamil inscriptions of Cholas in Shore Temple and on the floor of the Adirana Chanda Mandapam. Rajendra Chola, Rajaraja Cholas is there in Adirana Chanda Mandapam. Rajaraja and Rajendra Cholas are there. And in the original people who built the temple did not leave any Tamil inscriptions in Mamallapuram. But Nandivarma Pallava, later Pallava, has left a Tamil inscription in Adivaraha Mandapam. So I am not sure which one this is because the transformation is not that dramatic between Pallava and Chola Tamil letters. Okay, so he created an alphabet of the Tamil letters also. Okay, just an alphabetical table. He has got a. So now this I have given you Babington's interpretation, Babington's summarization, but Babington didn't know about the Pallavas. Okay, the Pallavas were not discovered as the rulers until 1840s. Walter Elliot is the one who first proposed it, and then they got more evidence of it later on. And Mamallapuram itself, that the Pallavas were the authors of Mamallapuram and what these monuments mean, the different opinions existed on different monuments. The first kind of real comprehensive picture emerged, conjecture came from Joao Dubreuil. He is a French scholar who wrote a paper, he visited in 1915, he wrote a paper in 1916. He proposed that three different kings had constructed, three different Pallava kings had constructed all the monuments in Mamallapuram. Narasimha Pallava, his grandson Parameshwara Pallava, and Parameshwara's son Rajasimha Pallava. These are the three kings he thought had created the monuments. There are other opinions from K.R. Srinivasan. Kalki was, but at that time Mamallapuram was not very popular. The popularity came because a Tamil author called Kalki, eponymous with the name, the man who wrote Ponniyin Selvan, which has become much more famous now, he wrote a historical novel. So that really took Pallavas to the public, and Narasimha Pallava and Mahendra Pallava, but not Parameshwara or Rajasimha. Narasimha Pallava and Mahendra Pallava feature in that story, so they became very famous. So people could identify with the Pallavas at that point, and Mamallapuram became more famous. Now, most of the people who went to Mamallapuram had to take a boat on the Buckingham Canal, or a horse or a bullock cart. Even Kalki went by boat. 1950s, you took a boat that took 8 hours to go from Adayar, probably here, right? This Buckingham Canal goes all the way to Mamallapuram. You either boarded here or a little further up or down, and some people boarded at Saidapet, came down the Adayar river, connected at Buckingham Canal, and then travelled. So you see all kinds of story. So they had to go by boat. It's not a pleasant journey. Or you could take a horse or a bullock cart, or you could walk. That's what most people did. There are trains, but the nearest train is to Madras or Chengalpet, and they had to take some other vehicle from there. And only after the 50s you could see go by buses and cars. The roads were not very good. Not many people owned cars anyway. Bus service was just kind of getting into the picture. So in 1960s, Nagasami, so there are other interpretations because there are variations and disputes. Some people thought, no, Mahendra was involved in a couple of monuments. Some people thought, different, there was debates about whether Arjuna's penance is Arjuna or Bhagirath. So there are multiple contests. There is even one contention that everything is built, but it's not Hindu at all, it is a Jain thing. There is a person called Mailai Chini Venkatasamy who argued that all of it is Jain, nothing is Hindu. Nagasami in 1962 wrote a new paper. This contested Dubreuil's contention that three kings had built it. He said, no, Narasimha and Parameshwara are not involved at all. It was entirely Rajasimha Pallava. 13 years later, two professors at Madras Christian College, Michael Lockwood, gift Shiromani, and then two others of their associations, Vishnu Bhatt and Dayanandan, formed a group called the Tambaram Associates. They refuted Nagasami and said, no, Nagasami is wrong, Dubreuil is right. There's a reason for this, and they gave a bunch of arguments. Okay, we will come to one specific argument. It's a very elaborate argument. It's too little time for this. I have a more detailed version of this talk. It's on YouTube, you can search it. There is one in Tamil called 2000 Years of Mamallapuram. There is one in English also, but that comes only up to Nagasami's period. So if you want to, you can go see the talk video, or you can study the papers. Their papers are there. In 2001, Michael Rabe came up with a slightly different interpretation of Arjuna's penance, and 2010, Baluswamy came up. But fundamentally, these are the two major schools of thought. That is one author, that is one king, or three kings. And the interpretation has variations. For example, Lakshmaya and all those talk, there is a king called Singama Naidu and a Puranic king called Mahabali who built this. Goldimam recorded, Babington translated, but didn't know. Hulsh got the king's name right, but all the chronology wrong. He didn't know who was Rajasimha, who was Mahendra. He thought Rajasimha was Mahendra's father because there was a king called Simha Vishnu whose name was a little confusing to them. Dubreuil gave the first comprehensive narration, the three kings, Narasimha, Parameshwara and Rajasimha. Nagasami proposed Rajasimha as the sole author. K.R. Srinivasan refuted Nagasami. So now the scholarship is divided. about nearly 2/3, let's say 60% is in the Dubrail school, 40% is in the Nagasami school in terms of who constructed. And there are multiple arguments, the sculptures, the development. So, for example, Dubrail's contention was that there are 4 types of monuments in Mamallapuram: cave temples, monoliths, that is the rathas. So, he thought the cave temples are built by Narasimha, maybe the first 2 or 3 rathas, the 5 rathas are built by Narasimha. The Arjuna's penance and the Govardhana Mandapam are built by Parameshwara, and maybe the Ganesh Ratha also built by Parameshwara. And the shore temple and other structural temples are built by Rajasimha. This was his contention. Okay. So, there is an evolution in architecture from cave temples to monoliths to structural temples, and there is supporting evidence about sculpture, about inscription, all that. So, the inscriptions story is saying the straight line script is from Narasimha's period, the curved script is from Rajasimha's period. So, this was the argument. And Lockwood came along and refutes Nagasami, and he gave several evidences of intermediate destruction in the 5 rathas and lack of destruction in the shore temple to argue about that, besides statistical analysis of sculptures and other features. So, very complicated argument. So, now not many monuments have Pallava inscriptions. Okay, we will focus on the Sanskrit inscriptions of the Pallavas. The Ganesha Ratha, this one, has a 11 stanza inscription on this wall, the second wall right next to the entrance of the shrine. The wall next to the inscription, you can see that. Okay, it's very faint. And this small mandapam, a cave temple called Dharmaraja Mandapam, has an exact copy, letter by letter, of the same 11 stanzas. Okay, and both of them call this temple Atyanta Kama Pallava Ishwara Graham. The name Narasimha Pallava, Parameshwara Pallava and Rajasimha Pallava are not there in the early monuments. Nobody is contesting that Rajasimha built a shore temple. The inscriptions of Rajasimha are clearly there in shore temple. All groups accept that Rajasimha. The only question of authorship is about the other temples. Okay. What is Atyanta Kama? Who is Atyanta Kama? The word Atyanta Kama is also figuring in Kanchi Kailasanatha temple. Atyanta Kama means Anta is end. Ati Anta is beyond end or without end. Right? Kama is desire. In Tamil, Kama means sexual desire, but Sanskrit Kama simply means desire. You can desire a coffee. You can desire to play for the cricket team of India. It's all desire. Kama simply means you can desire to build beautiful temples, sculptures, compose music, listen to it. Atyanta Kama they interpreted as infinite desire or endless desire. So, there is a king who calls himself
highest.
Not highest, endless, infinite desire. So, there is a king who is calling himself not just by his title, he is calling himself a Pallava of infinite desires, and he is calling this temple Atyanta Kama Pallava Ishwara Graham. Ishwara is the Shiva. He is worshipping this temple of Ishwara. Graham is the house or temple. Ishwara Graham means Shiva temple. So, the temple of Shiva built by the Pallava of infinite desires. So, which is the infinite desire Pallava? So, clearly Rajasimha called himself Atyanta Kama Pallava. He called himself, if you go to Kanchi Kailasanatha temple, you can see 244 titles of Rajasimha, including Atyanta Kama, Rajasimha, and then there are a bunch of other titles. Okay, he gave himself insane number of titles. Ishana Bhaktaha, Kanchi Mahamani, Ati Rana Chandaha, Samara Dhananjayaha, Unnata Ramaha, Veena Narada. He is equivalent to Narada in music. He is equivalent to Rama in valor. He is Samara Dhananjaya, equivalent to Arjuna in battle. Kala Samudra, I am an ocean of arts, he calls himself. All these titles are there. Okay, Agama Anusari, a person who supports Agamas. Ishvara Sharana, Ishana Bhakta, all enormous number of, you can put them in categories. What king gives himself 244 titles? So, that is one of them. So, Rana Jaya, right, victorious in battle, all of these are there. Some of these titles are there in the inscriptions as puns on words. Some of those are words fitting Shiva himself. Okay, there are words for Shiva that are used by Atyanta Kama as his titles, Rajasimha as titles. So Nagasami contends that all of them are only titles of Rajasimha. 16 of these words are there in the Dharmaraja Ratha. Now Dubrail and others contended that these were terms used by Narasimha Pallava to describe himself, including the word Atyanta Kama. And since the inscriptions are there in Adirana Chanda Mandapa, which some people attribute to Parameshwara Pallava, they also think he used it. So Nagasami's contention is, why would the son, the father and the grandfather use the same title when they rarely use the same title? But Rajasimha was officially called Narasimha, but he preferred the name Rajasimha, and he also called himself Mahamalla, just like his great grandfather. The first Narasimha is called Mahalla, he also called himself Mahamalla. So there are contentions, so disputes about this and disputes about where the inscriptions fall into place. So Ganesh Ratha and Dharmaraja Mandapam have exact copies in one script, Pallava Grantham. It is only there in Pallava Grantham script. Is that clear? Now near Tiger Cave we have the Adirana Chanda Mandapam, and this has two 5-stanza inscriptions, not one inscription, but two 5-stanza inscriptions on the opposite sides of the walls. Of the 5 stanzas, stanza 1, 2 and 5 of this inscription are the same as 8, 9 and 4 of the inscriptions there. The other 2 inscriptions are unique to Adirana Chanda. Okay. This is the facsimile of the inscription. This is actually a stamp page, and what it says is Sambhava Sthiti Samhara Karanam Vita Karanaha Bhuyat Atyanta Kamaya Jagadam Kamamardanaha Amaya Chitra Maya, and so on. So, okay, these 2 stanzas are there. It's a very interesting, fascinating inscription. Okay, there is a lot of poetic allusion, beautiful words, all kinds of things that are there, referring to how he built Rajasimha, or whichever king it is, built this temple to express his. So a lot of it is expression of the glory of Shiva. First 3 stanzas are about Shiva himself. Then he says, Tenedam Karitam Tunga Durjater Mandiram Shubham, and he says, I built this temple, Prajanam Ishta Siddhyartham Shankarim Bhutim Michata. Prajanam Ishta Siddhi Artham, to fulfill the desire of the people to get the blessings of Shiva. I built this temple. He has a line like that. Okay, that's there in Ganesha Mandapam and in Ganesha Ratham and Dharmaraja Mandapam, but it's not there in the Adirana Chanda Mandapam. So it's a very fascinating, beautiful inscription. And he uses, both of them end with the phrase Atyanta Kama Pallaveshwara Graham. Got that? Dharmaraja Mandapam, Ganesha Ratham have that word. And Dharmaraja Ratham, not the cave, but the tallest of the 5 Rathas, also has the word Atyanta Kama Pallaveshwara Graham at the top. Underneath it has the word Ranajaya, which is the word used by Rajasimha everywhere. So this seems to favor Nagasami's contention. So in the 1890s, 40-50 years after Babington recorded the inscriptions here, this much sand had accumulated in Adirana Chanda Mandapam. Okay, and this is what happened after you cleared it. Can you see the difference? It was covered up almost to the roof. So when Babington had gone there, Babington did not go here, by the way, only Haviland got. Babington only went to Mamallapuram. He didn't go to Tiger Cave where this Adirana Chanda Mandapam is. But at that period he had recorded the 2 inscriptions. I'll show you the 2 inscriptions. And he saw all of these things. So this is Adirana Chanda Mandapam. That is clearly the cave. There is a lingam in front. You can see that it is buried. So this is the sand level is here. So it was buried up to here, and all of this had to be excavated. That means over time a lot of sand had come in and buried these monuments there. And then they found this thing also. It's a small rock with an inscription of Mahishasuramardini. And on the 2 walls you see this inscription. Okay, this is 1890 versus 2015. You can see some things are missing here. We'll come to that later. These are the 2 walls on 2 sides. There are 5 stanzas on the left wall in Grantham, on the right wall in Nagari, that are letter by letter the same, but the script is different. The first 5 stanzas are letter by letter the same, except the left one is in Grantham, the right one is in Nagari. There is a very faint 6th stanza on the Grantham part, and there is another different stanza on the Nagari side, the text is different. Okay, let's not worry about that, but the same king has had both a Grantham script and a Nagari script with the same 5 stanzas on 2 sides of the temple. There is no other Nagari anywhere in Mamallapuram. Okay. And what does it say? It starts with the 8th and 9th phrase, Srimato Atyanta Kamasya Dvishadarpapaharina Srinide Kamaragasya Hararadana Sangina. Again, talking about how he worshipped Shiva, and his crown was covered with the lotus gems from the feet of Shiva and so on. Okay. If you go to Kailasanada temple in Kanchipuram, you have all these mini shrines surrounding the temple as a garland. Okay, there is a mantapa that surrounds the temple as a garland of mini shrines, and if you take a good look at these temples, each of these mini shrines has a sculpture at the back, 4 small pillars in the front, all of them with seated lions, seated yalis or standing yalis or whatnot, and below that you can see one of these stones is granite, the rest of the whole thing is sandstone. You can see the grey sandstone, one of them is granite, and the floor is also granite. Okay, Mamallapuram, everything is granite. Okay, everything here is sandstone except the stone called the Pattika. This Pattika has Nagari inscriptions. This part called the Kumudam has Grantham inscriptions, and the base part, this flat larger stone at the very bottom, has what are called calligraphic Nagari inscriptions. Is that clear? There is a Nagari inscription very similar to the one you see in Tiger Cave Adirana Mandapam at the top. There is Grantham inscription, 2 inscriptions, some of it is worn off here. There is 2 sets of them in several of the shrines. I think you can see here, see here is eroded here, but in some of these there is on the slightly tilted part also there is an inscription. Some of them on the front face there is an inscription. Okay, they are both, all of them give the same text. They are titles of, so you have the words like Atyanta Kama, Rajasimha, Ranajaya, Unnata Rama, Kala Rahita, Kalanka Rahita, Kala Samudra, all these titles that I mentioned about earlier, they are all there. Okay, in fact that is what you are seeing here. This is the Grantham and this is the calligraphic Nagari, some of them. Okay, so I'll give you, you can go look up my website or some of the other talks where I talk about it in greater detail. This is what it is. That is the calligraphic Nagari. This is the Grantham, and this one here you see is the Nagari. You can see a very fainter Grantham here. There are slight variations between the 2. One is called a floriated Grantham, the other is called regular Grantham. They are both similar to the curved version you find in Mamallapuram. Okay, so you have words like Atyudaraha, right, and so on. And this is much more calligraphic. You can see that the basic letters here, there is a peacock representing the diacritical curved top on letters there. There are like lotus-like plant leaves and tendrils at the bottom of the letters. Very beautiful calligraphic work here. Okay.
Sorry, the Shiva idol there is different in each case, or is the same in every?
In the mini shrines?
Yes.
Yeah, they are very different. It's not just Shiva. So, in fact, there are in the eastern and western corridors, it is Shiva Soma Skanda, Shiva Parvati and Skanda. In the southern corridor, it is Shiva mostly as Samhara Murti. He is battling with Arjuna. There is Kirata Arjuna sculpture, there is Gangadhara sculpture, there is Shiva, fighting various asuras, Jalandhara Samhara, etc. There is even Narsimha and all that. In the other one, the northern corridor, it's all Anugraha Murti. Shiva blessing Ravana, Shiva blessing Vishnu, Shiva blessing Manmata and so on. Others. Very different. Each one of them has a different sculpture. So now, Dubrail's interpretation, Dharmaraja Ratha inscription, the 5 Rathas inscription by Narasimha Pallava, Athirana Chanda by Parameshwara Pallava, and Shore Temple inscription by Rajasimha Pallava. Right? Versus Nagasami's contention is that if one king can use 2 variations of 2 different scripts in Kailasanada, this Atyanta Kama, the man of infinite desires, why do you need 3 kings to interpret 3 variations in Mamallapuram? This is the same king who has done an absolutely spectacular temple in Kanchipuram. he has 3 temples that are definitely his. The shore temple, the hilltop temple called the Olakaneshwara temple, and a smaller temple, if you go to the entrance of the city near the Adayar Ananda Bhavan, there's a small temple called the Mukunda Nayanar temple. 3 very different styles of structural temples. So he says Rajasimha built all of them. He is the one who has come up with the temples that are the cave temples, that are the monoliths, the open air bas reliefs, and the shore temples. So that was his contention, and he says the conjecture that one king cannot use multiple scripts is not valid, because clearly you have 2 variations of 2 scripts in Kanchipuram. That was his contention. Now, I had studied this Kanchipuram temple, I had this thing, and I had gone on a tour of Nungambakam, that college road, and I stumbled upon a book, this book by Captain Carr, published in 1869. This has the papers of Babington and William Chambers and McMahon and all those people who had written all the papers from 1800 to 1700 to 1869. Okay, that book was there. When I went along, I found, you remember there are 2 inscriptions in Atirana Chanda, one in Grantham, one in Nagari in opposite whiles. So there should be 2 transcripts, right? One is a Grantham transcript, the other is a Nagari transcript. But the book had 3 transcripts. The 3rd transcript was in a script that was not clear at all what it was. It looked a little bit like Nagari but didn't. After Babington, nobody mentions this transcript. No archaeologist from 1828 until 2015, to the best of my knowledge, not just archaeologists, travelers, others, experts, historians, nobody mentions this. Nagaswamy had not heard of it. So I emailed Nagaswamy. He said, what is he? I showed him a picture and he said, this is extraordinary, what is this? So I went to his house, I took him to the library, showed him the picture, and he says, amazing. And then when he saw the more detailed version of not just this transcript but the Ganesharatha transcript, he found a sketch of a temple at the bottom of Ganesharatha transcript. He said, there is a sketch of a temple, is it there? That was also forgotten. And so I went there, a month later, I found it, this thing, I don't have a good picture of it, but I do have a picture of it. So then he invited me to come and give a talk at Tamil Arts Academy. He said, you do the intro, I will give a talk about it. It's very interesting because I want to talk about, look, now there is a 3rd transcript, 3rd inscription. So, but the 3rd transcript is there is no 3rd inscription, right? There is no place or location where there could be a 3rd inscription. So, there is 3 possibilities. One, that the inscription existed, it's now destroyed or lost or buried. Remember, Adirana Chandamanama, whole of thing was buried. Maybe it's somewhere else that's not properly recorded. Or it never existed. That's also quite possible, right? It never existed. Which is right? So he gave me a chance to talk about it. So this actually, Babington had not gone to Tiger Cave or Atirana Chandamanaba. Another person called Fiat de Havilland, Colonel de Havilland, had gone there. He had gone with a couple of scholars, they recorded it. This is the Grantham script that they transcribed faithfully. This is the Nagari script that they transcribed faithfully. This is the 3rd script, that's the puzzling one. Where is it coming from? This is the rewriting of the Grantham script in current day Grantham or 19th century Grantham. And this is the rewriting of the Nagari script in 19th century Nagari. This you can read. Anybody who wrote today's Grantham and Nagari can read this. This you can figure out if you know that, but you have to be trained a little bit. You have to practice. This is a complete puzzler and nobody's mentioned this. So he was very fascinated. So I gave a brief talk about it. This is me at Tamil Arts Academy at his house basically. We are giving this talk. And if you want to connect Colonel de Havilland to something, the church next to the US consulate, the George Cathedral I think it's called, that was the one he built. He has designed that. I think his wife is buried there, he may himself be buried there. So this is the 3rd transcript. What is this? This is very clearly not the Nagari there in Mamallapuram. But Professor Michael Lockwood thinks it is the Nagari, it's just a slightly different one. Okay, I will come to that a little later. So this is Babington's Ganesharatha transcript. And you can see at the end of the transcript, the bottom is a temple, sketch of a small temple. This is in the Ganesha Ratha, and it looks like a miniature version of the Ganesha Ratha itself. Not a proper sketch of the temple, but just a kind of a trace outline. When I went to the temple, I found out that that actually is there. It's not like Babington drew it out of his imagination. That picture is actually, that sketch is actually there, inscribed at the base of that inscription. So this is Lockwood's facsimile of the Ganesha Ratha inscription. It doesn't have the sketch, but Babington's transcript does have it. Okay. A closer photograph. And that's it. I splashed some water on it and took it with my mediocre Canon PowerShot photograph in whatever light there was. That's the best shot, but you can see, right? You can see the traces of a structural temple or a monolith temple that looks like the sketch that inspired that Babington sketch. So this inscription was the one that is now at a contention, except now it's not written I copy, it is written in the meter form, right? The letter in the actual inscription, there is smaller space at the top. You can see, I can show it to you. You can see it's a curved stone, right? So they are not equal stanzas. So the first stanza ends somewhere here, the second stanza starts there, the third stanza ends in the middle, and then so on. So it's not written stanza by stanza. The transcript though is written stanza by stanza in arranged way, in a way we can read it for ourselves. So this is the way it is written. Okay. Now the question is, what is it? This transcript is again letter by letter the same as the Nagari inscription that is there. Now was there a third inscription, or is just a variation of this? Why would somebody put a different font or different transcript when they already had a proper transcript of that Nagari inscription, was the question. Dr. Nagasamy contended that this was, so this is what it looks like, that's what the transcript looks like, and you can see that one of the stanzas is a longer stanza in a different meter. The other stanzas are in a meter called Anushtub, 8 letter per quarter stanza. There is a longer stanza, Atirana Chandaf Patiravani Bujam, Atirana Chandeshwaram Idamakarot, Ihagiri Tanaya Guhagana Sahito Niyata Kritarati Bhavatu Pashupati. That is the longer stanza in a very beautiful meter, and that's also there. You can see some damage, but they are able to read it in spite of the damage. But where is that inscription? Nagasamy's contention was that there are such a monument like this with this kind of inscription that he has seen somewhere. I think he mentioned Cambodia, but I have not seen a transcript of this, and he called it rustic Nagari. There is a more cruder version of the Nagari that the royal inscriptions have used. I have not seen any copy of the rustic Nagari. I don't know where it is. He said there are 2 Nagaris, some other monument. So this is rustic Nagari. That was his contention. And so this was the presentation at Dr. Nagasamy's house.
So is this the only sort of known example of this particular form?
Yes. No. I thought it was, because this is the only one I have seen of this Nagari. But Dr. Nagasamy contended this rustic Nagari exists somewhere else. I don't know where. He mentioned some temple in Cambodia where there are 2 Nagaris, and one of this is rustic Nagari, and this script is Nagari. So he immediately identified as rustic Nagari. So somebody has mentioned it. Problem is I have not located it. I go and type Google this, my paper comes up, my blog comes up. So I don't know where this rustic Nagari is, right? So it may be there somewhere. I have no idea. So this is the talk there. Now this is the de Havilland transcript that is in Babington's paper. But Lockwood, when he went through it, he said the damage and all he is avoided. So maybe the damage happened later, and the letters are, Lockwood has put, included the places where that stone has eroded, and he has talked about the contention. There, it's not like that. This is from the Nagari inscription, and he also questions certain things. For example, the place where the last stanza which says Ihagiri Tanaya, he says Himagiri Tanaya. Iha means here, Hima means snow. Whether it's Ihagiri Tanaya means Ihagiri Tanaya, that is here the mountain's daughter, Parvati. Himagiri Tanaya means Himagiri is Himalaya's daughter, same thing. The meaning is the same, but the 2 letters are different. That was his contention, that the inscription has different.
Is it Tanaya
Tanaya. Tanaya only. Okay, so he gave an annotated letter. So basically, he saw my talk presentation at Nagasami's house. Somebody put it on video and somebody shared it with him. Lockwood is still around. He is in Maine. And he had an email exchange with me. And his contention was that I don't think there is a third inscription. I agree that there's third transcript. I think it is just a variation of the second script, the Nagari script, that is in this form. Okay. How am I doing on time?
We go about 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay. So his contention was this, and he said, I can't prove it to you. That you can't prove something that didn't exist, right, or doesn't exist. I can't prove that there is no third inscription. But it's my conjecture that there was no third inscription and that this is just a variation of the second transcript. Mine was, why would somebody do two different variations of it in a script that of an 8th century script that's no longer in use, right? Especially when there is a contemporary transcript that he has also written of a 19th century Devanagari. He has written that. So why would somebody put this third one, which is to me, and especially when an archaeologist says this is a script called rustic Nagari, right? So I have no idea, I'm not an epigraphist, I'm not an archaeologist. I know how to read Pallava Grantham, I taught myself, but that doesn't make me an epigraphist. I'm just an enthusiast who did some dabbling, that's all. So he sent me more and all that stuff. He talks about discrepancies and all that. I won't go into that. One, some of it is above me, and two, probably well beyond the scope of this talk. So the summary of the discoveries, rustic Nagara, this thing, a sketch of the temple. So I discovered one, the third inscription. Nagasami discovered the temple sketch. There are three more, and we found out one or two mistakes that Babington made in his transcription. That's okay. There is a Himagiri discrepancy. He is completely convinced that there is no third inscription at all. Just a rough. He may be right. He is, after all, a person who's written books about Kailasanada, Mamallapuram. His conjecture may be right and all that stuff. He's arguing. Now, very interestingly, from the 1890s photos, you see several other things that are there, including that Vishnu sculpture in the corner. It's only half there. That Vishnu sculpture is there under a tree now. We don't know where it came from. Okay, they are no longer there. This other monuments are not. They moved to some other place. Two lingas are missing. Some slabs are gone, and so on. Okay, maybe there is a missing slab with the third inscription. Maybe it's completely gone. Maybe it's buried. I don't know. But there's two more surprises in that book, not necessarily in Babington's paper, but in that book. So these are the missing stuff, but let's ignore this for now. There is a paper by Mackenzie which has a big map. Colin Mackenzie, who wrote a paper 30 years before Babington, and he talked about Adirana Chanda Mandapam, and he talked about two other things: inscribed stone and inscribed rock. Okay, this is the inscribed rock that he mentioned. This is known. There is an inscription here that was recorded in the 1840s with the inscription of Kulothunga Chola. It is there in that book itself, McMahon Braddock, that paper, it's there. Swasti Sri Thiruvai Kelvi Munbaga Tribhuvana Chakravartigal Madurayum Yeedamum Karuvurum Pandiyan Mudithalayum Kondu. This is signature phrase for Kulothunga III. So they know that as soon as you mention it, every Tamil epigraphist will tell you this is an inscription of Kulothunga, the third inscription. So there is a rock with not a Pallava inscription but Kulothunga Chola's inscription, which was covered up to the top part. Understand? But in 2004, the tsunami exposed the lower part of the base of the rock, and they saw one more inscription there in 2004. Okay, 10 years before my discovery of this Babington thing, they dug it up and found an entire brick monument all around this rock. No Pallava sculpture, no Pallava inscription, but an entire brick monument all around it, including this that they think is a spear, and they call this, and some of the bricks look like something that they found from pre-Pallava monuments in places like Arikamedu and all that. So they think this is a Sangam era monument. Probably they are very sure it's a before Pallava, pre-Pallava monument. They think it is a Murugan temple, except there is no Murugan sculpture. Where the shrine should be, there is a large pit which is completely against all the temple architectural methodologies. I mean, there is no architecture of a temple where there is a pit where the shrine, where the sanctum should be. There is a huge pit there. So it's confusing, but the inscription does talk about Murugan temple and other things. But this is a much later inscription. This is 500 years later, Kulothunga III, much later than Rajasimha. Okay. There is also a Rashtrakuta inscription which they discovered. That is the one that was visible below the level of the sand, and they found out of this. Okay. So it explores this and all of stuff. Okay. Now remember, Mackenzie mentions an inscribed stone. And there is an inscribed stone. There is this monument marker and this block of stone here. Nobody pays any attention to it. Nobody goes to it. The tourists don't show it. Our own group has not shown not much interest in it. When we go to the stone, there is a small block of the stone with a Tamil inscription. This is clearly a Chola era, about 200 years before Kulothunga, but after Pallavas. Okay, Pallavas are done at 8th century. This is maybe 10th century Chola inscription. Kulothunga III is much later, 12th century inscription. Okay. So what does this one say? This is recorded by the 1840s paper. Okay. It says, that transcript says, Swasti Sri, Ichagattala tam anarku madita vittagi, it's called Amudha vittagi, Mappadiyil Thirumidukku, and so on. It's a donation inscription for providing food to the pilgrims who come there, based on certain donations of a gold coin given. Now a recent interpretation as, what is Ichagattala tamanarku? A recent interpretation has read it as Ichatta perumanarku. If it's Jagatala Tamanar, we don't know what that means. It could mean, the closest interpretation you could mean is Stala Shayana, Jaga Tala Tam Anarku. Jaga, and the temple, main temple in Mamallapuram is called Stala Shayana Perumal. It's sung about, it's what the temple is still in worship. Unlike in all other places where Vishnu is reclining on Adishesha, right? He is Ananta Shayana. In every other place, he is Ananta Shayana, including the famous temple in Srirangam, famous temple in Kanchipuram, famous temple all over the place, right? He is Ananta Shayana everywhere else. But here he is not Ananta Shayana, he is Stala Shayana. And between the two shore temples also there is a Stala Shayana temple, where he is reclining on the rock, not on a Adishesha, not on the serpent. So if this Jagatala Tamanarka, I thought this could be in a Vishnu temple, and since it is buried at this level, which is at the parallel level to the Adrina Chanda Mandapam, I thought there might be a buried, this is the top of a buried temple. You have to excavate and figure it out. I mentioned this couple of times, completely ignored. Nagasamy hosted me, that program was also completely ignored, so I don't expect anything to happen. It may be one, but Ichatta Perumanarku could mean that it is referring to Muruga, not Vishnu. Maybe there is a reference to the possible Muruga temple there. Maybe there is a Muruga temple Bandan. I am just conjecturing here, okay. That's okay, this is the rest of the inquiry. So, Rajasimha have, not just Babington, but Rajasimha have left us some more surprises that maybe excavations will expose. So, thank you for the opportunity.